what if Jesus had a twin brother? For millions of early Christians, this wasn't hypothetical, it was doctrine. They believed a man named Thomas was Jesus' identical twin, and they wrote gospels about it. One of those gospels was lost for nearly 1,700 years until farmers in Egypt accidentally dug it up. And this is the story of Christianity's lost twin gospel. To understand this lost gospel, we need to first understand something surprising about early Christianity itself. A modern picture of Christianity as one unified religion is historically backwards. In the first century, there were Christianities, plural. Different regions developed different texts, different traditions, different beliefs about who Jesus was and what he taught. Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria, Rome, each center cultivated its own distinct form of the faith. Among these early Christianities, one tradition stands out for a remarkable claim: Thomasine Christianity. This branch flourished in Syria, Mesopotamia, and remarkably India. It centered on the Apostle Thomas, but not just as a disciple. These Christians believed that Thomas was Jesus' literal twin brother, and the evidence for this belief is baked right into his name. Let's decode it. In ancient texts, this apostle appears as Didymus Judas Thomas. 3 names, here's what they mean. Didymus is Greek for twin. Thomas comes from the Aramaic word for twin. And Judas, that's his actual name, meaning of Judah. So early Christians were essentially calling this apostle Twin Judas. Why would anyone emphasize twin twice in 2 different languages unless they meant twin of someone specific? The Thomasine Christians had their answer. Thomas was the twin brother of Jesus himself. This wasn't a fringe belief. Indian Christians on the western coast still trace their church to Thomas. This tradition has survived for nearly 2,000 years. And the Thomasine communities didn't just preserve oral traditions, they created an entire library of texts, and the Gospel of Thomas was just one book in a much larger collection. And let's look at what these early Christians were reading. The Infancy Gospel of Thomas reveals what early Christians wondered about. What was Jesus like as a kid? The answers were complicated. In one story, young Jesus makes clay pigeons on the Sabbath. When criticized for working on the holy day, he claps his hands and the birds come alive and fly away. In another, a playmate bumps into Jesus while running. Jesus strikes him dead on the spot, then later raises him back to life. A teacher who criticizes young Jesus, struck blind and mute. These stories shock modern readers, but they reveal something important. The 2nd century was an explosion of Christian literary creativity. Communities across the ancient world were writing, sharing, and debating texts about Jesus. The Infancy Gospel wasn't considered heresy by its readers, it was scripture. It answered questions the canonical Gospels left open. The Acts of Thomas promoted values radically different from what became mainstream Christianity, strong opposition to marriage and family life. The Hymn of the Pearl, embedded within the Acts of Thomas, stands as one of antiquity's most beautiful mystical texts. It tells of a prince sent from the east to Egypt to retrieve a pearl guarded by a serpent. The prince forgets his mission, falls asleep, then awakens to remember his true identity and purpose. Early Christians read this as allegory, the soul's journey through the material world, forgetting its divine origin, then awakening to return home. So what happened to all these texts? Why do most people only know Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? And the answer involves centuries of debate, church councils, and political power. As Christianity became the Roman Empire's official religion in the 4th century, leaders needed to define which texts were authoritative. The Thomasine writings, with their twin theology and unconventional teachings, didn't make the cut. Texts were suppressed, copies were destroyed, the Gospel of Thomas vanished from history. Until 1945, Egyptian farmers digging for fertilizer near the town of Nag Hammadi struck something unexpected, a sealed clay jar containing 13 leather-bound codices. Inside were 52 texts, including the only complete copy of the Gospel of Thomas. For the first time in over 1,600 years, scholars could read what Thomasine Christians actually believed. The text contains 114 sayings attributed to Jesus. Some overlap with the canonical Gospels, others appear nowhere else in ancient literature. Understanding texts like the Gospel of Thomas isn't about undermining faith, it's about recovering the full richness of early Christian thought. The Christianity that won and became the Roman Empire's religion was one option among many. For centuries, millions of believers followed Thomas, read his gospel, and believed he was Christ's twin brother. Their faith was real, their text was scripture, their story deserves to be told. The Gospel of Thomas opens with these words. These are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke. What secrets? What did this twin brother claim Jesus taught? In future videos, we'll explore those 114 sayings and discover why some early Christians found them more compelling than Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John.